What up, Metabolic?
Hello.
It's Laura.
I'm Bella.
And Danny.
Danny. Woo! So who's Danny, you might wonder, if you have not seen it before. Danny, who are you?
I head up our coaching program at Metabolic, and I am really excited. I always watch your guys' videos, so it's nice to crash the party every once in a while and join you too.
We are extremely happy to have you. So, as you know, we take questions that are sent to us from the community, and you guys asked us one that is a little bit more tricky with regarding mindset than Bella and I felt qualified to answer on. And the question was, how to overcome imposter syndrome.
And just leaving it up. That's it. That's the question.
That is the question.
I think we should start by defining it, because I think both of you had to look it up, right? So this is my understanding of imposter syndrome, and I've thought about this a lot, because I think the only reason I'm qualified to talk about it is because I pretty much spent my entire career with imposter syndrome. It's basically starting at 16 years old, my first job, I had imposter syndrome, and imposter syndrome is like, it's really this feeling that we just don't deserve what we have, right? It's this sense that we don't feel like we're either qualified enough or good enough. And then the imposter piece comes because eventually we're going to get found out. Like we're a fraud putting on an act. And then eventually someone's going to catch us and be like, I knew you weren't as good as you presented yourself to be. So that's imposter syndrome. And the reason I say like I've had this my whole career is because I've been lucky to have it in some sense, because I've always had someone kind of throwing me into the fire, putting me in a situation that I had to just do before I was ready for. So like my first job ever, I was like 15 years old, and my sister's like, you're going to teach this exercise class. I had no experience, and I get up there and like my voice is cracking, and like I have like huge sweat stains. I'm so nervous. It's just like so embarrassing, but like my career kept progressing like that. It's like I was always in a situation that I wasn't quite ready for. So that's kind of where imposter syndrome has shown up for me. But both you two said you had kind of experienced that as well at least at some point in your work or in your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like Danny said, Laura and I both did actually have to look up. Laura had a little bit more, familiarity, but I was actually grateful to look it up, because it said that actually a lot of people experience these thoughts, and I could definitely relate. I think like Danny, all the way back to kind of teenage years, your first job, I was a waitress and I had no idea what I was doing at 16, waiting tables. Truly, I'd never even carried a plate before, balancing. So I think it is, just getting thrown the deep end. And then also, I think comparison is probably a big trigger for a lot of people, seeing other people in similar positions with maybe more qualifications, or maybe, gosh, they seem way more knowledgeable than me, I'm not good enough. So I can definitely relate to some of those feelings for sure.
I mean, and I will be real with you, because you guys ask us these questions. You expected me to know this answer and be able to help you. And I do not. That is just, I'm like, what? No, I'm just a real person and I'm a normal person. But I recognize that like I'm constantly, I feel like sometimes, like I love interacting with all of you. But at the end of the day, I am just like, I don't know what I'm doing sometimes, and I'm just trying my best. And
I think that's probably like step one. So first of all, I've had this pretty much my whole career. And then the other piece of this is the number one question that comes up for coaches and trainers. So I spent a lot of time training most of my career. And now I'm like a coach of a coach. So we answer a lot of these questions that are just like, a lot of these coaches don't feel qualified. They don't feel knowledgeable enough, or they don't have enough experience. And so I think what you said, Laura, is kind of the first foundation. I always tell them, I was like, look, like just embrace that this is kind of a human experience. So it just because there's this word for it that maybe a lot of us haven't heard of, it's kind of just part of the normal human experience. I think there's this underlying tone that we have to constantly be winning. And by winning, meaning like achieving or just feeling good all the time. Like you shouldn't be embarrassed. You shouldn't say something silly. You shouldn't be anxious or like kind of have bad days, like all these things. Like anytime that we have these internal triggers, we feel like, man, I should not be feeling that way. And that's where we define it as imposter syndrome. But really, that's kind of just the human experience. So I think starting there is just like, hey, this is kind of a human thing. And I shared with you two just before we hopped on, there is research out of Georgia State University that says pretty much almost all of us, about 70%, which is really high, in like psychological studies. 70% of us has felt this way, at least at one point along the way. And then what's interesting is that the other 30%, it's actually probably worse than imposter syndrome. We can call it we'll call it delusional syndrome. These are the people who think that they're better than they actually are. So these are people they're like, I'm amazing, but their confidence is way high, but their competence is kind of low. Whereas imposter syndrome is kind of reverse. Your confidence is actually probably better than your confidence. But these delusional people, these are like the people, there's a really interesting stat, like 94% of really bad managers, really bad listeners as managers grade themselves as really high in listening. Does that make sense? Does that come off right? So they had all these managers, their employees graded them like, these people are terrible listeners. And they asked all these people, how good of a listener do you think you are? And they're like, oh, definitely like top tier listener, really good. I hear all my people. So it's like kind of cringy. So it's almost like, which pool would you rather be in? Because this is kind of a part of the human experience based on different, this could be in any area of your life.
That makes me feel better already.
No, it is interesting. This person will remain nameless, but I did go to high school with someone who was the great example of the other extreme, because this person literally was tone deaf, but had the most confidence in singing loudly you've ever seen anywhere. Because they were really, 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 really good, but literally tone deaf and could not face the reality that, like, I don't know what happened, but I mean, like, it was literally painful, and it was, oh no, I'm the best. It was awful, sad, but this is helpful.
So it's a spectrum, right? Like, so based on what you can kind of go, ideally, your confidence equals your competence. And that's like, you don't feel imposter syndrome and you're not delusional, but we don't really live in that perfect world. Like, you're kind of bouncing, you can bounce in different areas of your life, either end of the spectrum. And a lot of people go a little bit more extreme. And I do have, you guys can tell me to shut up. I like this topic a lot, so just cut me off. But I do have like a little formula that I've kind of implemented that it helped me, that I'm happy to kind of go through.
Yes,
and
all right. Please.
All right, cool. I'll run through it real quick, and then you guys can just be like, no, that's a terrible formula. But this has worked for me. And I pulled this from, there's a book called Think Again by Adam Grant. It's a great book. And he kind of talks about this a little bit too. And he talks about these elements. And so really the formula, if you are struggling with imposter syndrome, so you go, yes, that's definitely me. The formula is effort times humility, or it's effort plus humility times time. So I think that's the formula that I kind of follow. So what do I mean by that? So let's start with effort. The effort is just trying. Like, just did you show up and do your best? So, for example, when I got hired on at Metabolic, head of coaching, I didn't have a ton of experience coaching coaches. I had a ton of experience training. And I even think Jeff and Mark, who interviewed me, I think they would have said, like, we were kind of skeptical about your experience level. Like, we didn't know. That's a perfect example of me not being qualified. The competence wasn't there. So my confidence was lower than it was. So I had this imposter syndrome. And all I could do is show up every day. Like, all I can do is build this program to the best of my knowledge, communicate as much as possible, bring the energy, bring the presence. All I can do is just show up. That's literally all that's in my control. My sister often says, like, you're responsible for the effort, but not the outcome. Or you can only guarantee the effort, not the outcome. So that is kind of like the starting place. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, actually, when I work with coaches. The people of the biggest imposter syndrome are actually the people who just haven't jumped in the arena. They keep getting certifications. They keep getting education. In reality, they'd be better off just training their mom, training their cousin, just putting together a program, see if it works. So just showing up is the first piece. I think it's a great start. And you start to build the comments like, look, I did my best. And you can rest your head at night being like, that's the best I could do. Now, the other part of the formula, the reason humility is in there is because if you give effort, you're going to look silly. You're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to say things you wish you could take back. Like, that's the example of me in my first training classes. Like, my voice cracked. My workout was terrible. It made no sense. It looked like monkeys were dropped into a gymnasium. Like, it was terrible. Like, it was such a bad workout. I cringe still thinking about it. But the only way I could even become embarrassed was to show up and teach that class. So starting with the effort, but then just having humility to be like, this is kind of the human thing. We get embarrassed. My face turned red. I started sweating. And then guess what? Then I survived. Then it was all, you get stronger, you get more confident as you can sit with that stuff. And a lot of research has shown that the best way to get confidence is just to cope. And the only way you can cope is if something happens. You get embarrassed, you say something stupid. So you just have to have the humility to apologize or commit to doing better, just that human experience. So give it your effort, but have a little compassion for yourself that you're only human. And then I say multiply it by time, because this is not a switch. Like, you're not going to watch this call with us and then just be like, okay, I don't have it anymore. Like, it is a time. It's like something you cultivate, right? Like anything else, like gratitude or optimism or mindfulness around food, like all those things, they're not a switch, it's a practice. So that's like my formula that's really worked for me. I'm like, look, I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to say something stupid. I'm going to forgive myself or apologize if I need to. And then I'm just going to let time play out. And that detachment has really helped me.
I love it. That's really cool.
One of the big rules of improv is to like fail gracefully. So I think that's kind of the same thing here. I have a question though for someone that maybe Bella could say this is something I feel like this resonates a lot with women, especially. My issue with this would be, I always feel like I could have put in like 5 million times more effort. Like, couldn't I have done this like even better than I just did it now? Like I could so what would, maybe this just means I'm a little too overachiever or like try too hard to get straight A's or whatever, but how would those people, because like I could always be, I could come up with 50 million reasons I could have done that better.
Totally. Yeah. So there's some research on this. I'm so glad you asked, Laura. So there's this idea that we can be something called a maximizer or a satisficer. So a maximizer is like sort of what you're describing. It's someone who wants the best of the best. Like, I could always do better. Like, I could have done 5 more things today. Like, I shouldn't have taken so long on my lunch break. Like, I can't believe I watched an hour of television. You can always find those spots. That's an example of a maximizer. And it's really just a frame of mind. So and then on the other end, it's a satisficer. And satisficers are people who they're good enough people. So they just go, that was good enough for me. They define it on their own. And they have to, and we all, like, Bella's might be different than mine, which would be different than yours, Laura, but whatever good enough is, we have to define that and say, oh, look, that's good enough. Like, that's going to be good enough. And then you're able to cultivate actually more meaning and more greatness out of that good enough, because it's sustainable. Like, maximizing is not sustainable. So I would challenge those people to just say, like, okay, where am I being a maximizer versus satisficer? And the research shows that maximizers succeed way more in the short term, but are oftentimes less satisfied. They have less life satisfaction, and they just can't sustain it. So like, if they're coming out of school, they'll have the better status job, they'll make more money, but they won't be satisfied with their choice, where a satisficer is happy with their choice. And because they can stay in the game longer, they actually end up long-term. It's like a 30-day diet. Like, a 30-day diet is the maximizer. And then the satisficer is like 80-20 diet forever. Right. So that's kind of the example. That would be a lens I would challenge those type of people to look through. And we're all maximizers or satisficers in different areas of our life too. And that's okay. Like, to be a maximizer as a parent, that's probably a good thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. But maybe being a satisficer with, I don't know, nutrition is okay. Or maybe being a satisficer at work is okay. So it's just choosing what works for you. But I think that can help a lot. And so that's what I mean by effort. Like, can you lay your head down and be like, I really did do my best today. That's all I got in the tank. And it'll be different on different days too. Monday, you may crush it. And then Tuesday is not quite what Monday was. So I think that's how I would address that if I was coaching myself, which for whatever reason, I do a lot.
I love it. Really good advice, Danny. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this definitely is awesome. Do you have any other questions, Bella? Otherwise, we'll...
No, but I know that you are definitely speaking to me. So if you're watching this and feel really heard and seen right now, I hope this helped you, because I can definitely relate to all of these behaviors that we chatted about today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Danny.
I hope that stuff was useful. I'm sorry to just take over your call. I do love this stuff, though. So thank you for having me on.
We'll have to have you more often.
I would love that.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.